I return to those letters between the ECB in Frankfurt and the Irish government in 2010. Earlier I spoke to the chairman of the Oireachtas banking inquiry, Labour deputy Ciarán Lynch. I began by asking him what he made of the letters and how they might assist his inquiry.
Well, the very first thing I would say is that I welcome that the European Central Bank have now actually published these letters. There's no question about it that they raise a series of questions that need to be examined by the inquiry. It also has to be borne in mind that these letters relate to events that came 2 years after the night of the banking guarantee, and this raises questions itself as to what actually happened in that two-year period between the guarantee and the issuance of these letters. Why was it that in November 2010, 2 years after the guarantee in September 2008, that it seems the government had very, very little room to manoeuvre or to negotiate with the central bank? And was the way that the guarantee actually structured, was it inevitable or was it avoidable during that 2 year period that such an event would actually, or a cycle of events would actually kick into place?
So in a sense, are you saying this is correspondence which really shows us how everything came to this crisis point, and there's a lot more backstory, if you like, yet to be filled in?
Well, what I would recommend is that the letters should not be looked at in isolation. What they need to be looked at is as parts of a jigsaw that needs to be put together. They certainly provide a lot of information in regard to November 2010 and the period before this country entered the bailout programme. It certainly raises questions as to what actually happened between September 2008 and the issuance of these letters 2 years later. And it also brings us back to the very, very core question as to the financial crisis in this country. For a long period of time, and certainly indicated by the Nyberg report, it was implied that there was a liquidity crisis in the banks. In layman's terms, that means that there was a cash flow difficulty, and was the behaviour by government and by the European Central Bank and other parties based upon one that was defining the crisis as a liquidity one as opposed to a solvency crisis.
The head of the ECB today, Mario Draghi, was asked about his predecessor, Mr Trichet, or perhaps somebody else from the ECB, coming to appear before your inquiry when hearings get underway, and he seemed to imply that really wasn't particularly appropriate, that the ECB is accountable to the European Parliament and not to national parliaments.
Well, the European Central Bank has been brought into terms of the reference of the inquiry plan and proposal which is before the Oireachtas at the moment. I would hope that the European Central Bank would continue to operate in a cooperative manner with the inquiry. They have released this information today, and I would be of the view that they should make whatever information the inquiry requests of them available to us. The European Central Bank has a very significant role and responsibility in the governance of financial institutions across the European Union, no more so in this country, where we're living with the decisions of some of the impact of that crisis on a day-to-day basis. So I would be of the view, rather than the personalities of the European Central Bank, that the information that they have to hand should be made available to the inquiry. What
about the points being made by Fianna Fáil, by Michael McGrath today, that what these letters show us is that, well, in his view anyway, the ECB exceeded its remit, it exceeded its powers in the way it was dealing with this crisis and dealing with the Irish government?
Well, I would be mindful that I have to chair an inquiry, and as we move into the findings and recommendations of that report, which will be around this time next year, that we should have a greater clarity on that issue. But at this moment in time, I think it's, as I said earlier, it's about getting the different pieces of the jigsaw, putting them together and getting the full story told so that the Irish nation can learn extensively as to what actually happened, what led to a situation where banks were guaranteed, where it cost the state about €64 million, a situation that we're living with on a day-to-day basis. But ultimately, we also have to learn from the past to ensure that this crisis isn't revisited us in the future.
Very good, Ciarán Lynch. There we'll leave it. Thanks for talking to us.